Good morning. It's a cold Monday in Pittsburgh in February, so we're going to talk about the record transfer problems in the 70's Rockolas, meaning the gripper motor starts to bring the record out, lays it down on the turntable, and there are problems that show up in this process. This was prompted by a customer sent me a video of his machine, and I'll show it or show you something similar, but where the record came out. The record was brought out by the gripper bow, laid down on the turntable, and then nothing happened. And we had to walk him through the process of figuring out, well, what went wrong and what are the solutions, etc. There's about 4 or 5 common themes here that I think are worth going over, and then at the end I'll summarize this. And I hope it's helpful, probably about 15-20 minutes. So let me show you basically what was going on here and what we do to remedy this. The record transfer process starts when a pin is displaced and the readout arm comes around, hits that pin, and then that starts the gripper motor, brings out the record, lays it down on the turntable, and it should be a smooth process. And when the record is laid down, the turntable platter certainly continues to spin and everything else stops. But in this case, this customer, I'll show you, the jukebox brought out the record, and we're talking about sequence 14 through 19 in the manual. So I missed the record, but they laid it down, and then the turntable stopped, and it wasn't clear whether a fuse or circuit breaker had been opened or what the issue was. So we went through the differential here. Now, most times when the record comes out, and there's no record on this turntable, but when the record comes out, gets laid down, and then everything stops, either the fuse or the circuit breaker has blown. Well, that wasn't the case here. The circuit breaker would be the 1.6 amp mech fuse or circuit breaker on the back panel, and in this case it hadn't blown. So what I asked the customer to do was to take off the platter, and when he did that, it was pretty clear that the turntable motor was still working, but the turntable platter was not running. So that tells me that there's a friction problem here between the underside of the turntable platter and the rubber idler wheel itself and the turntable motor shaft. So once we got that resolved, and he shut it off, and clean the turntable shaft with alcohol, and the idler wheel with alcohol, and the inside of the rim here with alcohol, put it back on. He was in business, and that was an easy fix. And then the clue was that the circuit breaker had not blown, so everything else was healthy. It was simply a friction problem. Now, the other way I could have told that customer to determine whether the circuit breaker had blown or the fuse is simply to ask him to manually reject the record, either bring it in to the center of the record or use the switch on the back door. Once he had done that, the gripper bow took the record back to the magazine, so you knew there wasn't any electrical or short or issues. This was strictly a mechanical problem with not enough friction between the idler wheel and the inside of the turntable platter. Why it happened after he had been playing the machine for 4 months, now that's another story, but this was the easiest possible fix. Now, normally when you get a problem with the gripper bow hanging up in any stage of the transfer process, you either have a mechanical obstruction, a blockage, of lack of grease, whatever, or an electrical problem. So in this situation, yes, you can simply turn the knob on the gripper motor underneath there, but it's a lot easier to take a number, I think this is a 7mm hex wrench, loosen the 2 screws underneath the gripper motor and disengage the gripper motor gear from the main mech gear. And that way you can determine very quickly, hey, okay, this was an easy problem, but let's bring it back. You turn the wheel in the opposite direction of which you want to bring the gripper bow back. So bring it back, wait for that micro switch number 1 to click. You can hear it in the back, and then prove to yourself that there's no mechanical bind here at all, okay? That nothing occurred to cause the circuit breaker to go. So that's number 1. Rule out a mechanical or physical blockage. Now, suppose the record was selected back here. The readout arm hit the pin, but nothing happened. The gripper bow did not start the transfer process. Well, that's where you want to look at your circuit here. And we're talking about sequence 14. What do you got here? You got the number 2 micro switch. Well, you know where that is. That's on the back here. And you have the the control box underneath with those 4 Molex connectors, which be sure they're all intact. But what needs to happen at that point is that trip relay will shut off the gripper motor and, shut off the magazine motor and start the process. So that's what you would look at. And we've told you about how to service that before. And look at the number 2 micro switch. Actually, number 1 micro switch is in the circuit as well. But this would be the most likely cause of the problem if your record did not initiate the transfer process. Okay, suppose you blow your circuit breaker or fuse and you open up your jukebox and it looks something like this. Now the record would probably be in the gripper bow. The gripper bow brought the record out, but about 2/3 of the way through the process, it stops and there's no power. So you try the circuit breaker or replace the fuse and nothing good happens. Well, in this situation, about this position, you're looking at probably number 2 micro switch has to perform some functions at this point. And what you usually have to do, all things have to start from the home position. So you would bring the gripper bow back over to the home position, wait for the click, there it is, of the number 1 micro switch, and then get the gripper bow back in the home position. And then I'm going to tell you the most likely cause of the gripper bow hanging up at that position is going to be the number 2 micro switch operates at that time, and that goes through the 15 ohm resistor. It's a white resistor, and it sits in the this particular control box doesn't have it, but there's a 15 ohm resistor in there that slows down the gripper bow transfer. And if that is open, then everything comes to a stop, and that would be your solution. In that position where the gripper bow is about, I would say, about in this position, that's about when that resistor is activated to slow down the tone arm descent onto the record. Now, the next thing that occurs is number 2A operates, okay? So if you have a gripper bow, similar position, maybe a little farther on, but maybe it's just about ready to sit down and then the circuit breaker blows, then you're going to look at the 2A micro switch, which operates the cancel coil, because that's when the record's just about to set down. That's when this cancel coil says, okay, we don't need this selection anymore. So actually it's a readout cancel arm, says, you know what, we're going to cancel the pin because we're done. We want to be ready to move on to the next one. So oftentimes you will have a shorted readout cancel coil as the cause of this situation here. Here's what your readout cancel coils look like on the readout arm. We've gone over this several times before, but again, if the gripper bow is in this position, almost ready to set the record down, blows the fuse or circuit breaker, look for a shorted cancel coil as your cause. Now, the way to prove that then is to put the gripper bow back in the home position, put it back here, and then if you had selected a hit side record at that time, we'll select the non-hit side. And if it comes out and does the same thing, well, it's not going to be likely that both of your cancel coils are burnt out, so maybe there is another problem. But most of the time, if you select the non-hit side, it'll bring it out fine, and then you'll know, okay, the cancel coil that's bad is the hit side cancel coil, and we'll replace that. You just check it. Usually it will be open, okay? And it's easy enough to do. We've been through that before. Now, the last record transfer problem we're going to talk about is at the end of the record, when the record is about finished and it reaches the readout groove and should be canceling and sending it back. Well, nothing happens. So what's going on if your record's done and the needle's in the middle of the record and nothing happens? Well, yes, it could be your tone arm switch. I did have a shorted one or open one, it wouldn't work. It could be a stuck switch on the back door, which is your reject switch. That's very rare. More than likely, when you have a record that won't reject and go back to the rack, you're looking at the reverse relay in that bronze control box. And I got to tell you, the connections to this control box, you get a lot of mileage out of reseating and looking at them, but assuming they're intact, cleaning and servicing this reverse relay is probably what's going to solve your problem at that point. That's in the manual. That's a later sequence that is pretty well explained. Here is sequence 20 in the manual, which goes over the process of reversing the gripper motor and bringing the record back. Note that there are 3 switches in parallel there: the tone arm switch, the manual cancel on the back door, and actually micro switch number 3. If you ever have a situation where the record comes out, lays down on the turntable, and then immediately rejects back to the magazine rack, look for dysfunction there, a number 3 switch, because all 3 of these guys can complete the circuit to that reverse relay coil and send the gripper bow back and the record back to the magazine. So I just wanted to bring that out. But this is your circuit that you're looking to service when the record won't go back to the magazine. And look at that reverse relay. That's going to be most likely your bad boy. The last malfunction I want to speak on regarding the gripper transfer process is when the gripper bow brings the record out, lays it down on the turntable platter, but the gripper motor continues to run, jams, and blows a circuit breaker or fuse. And the cause here is going to be number 3 micro switch and its relationship to the release coil, because these are the 2 guys that stop the gripper motor, say, look, you've done your job, stop now. And if that happens, if you ever come across a situation where your gripper motor is jammed over the turntable, now not over the in any other position, please look for this circuit and of course the associated connections that go with it. Well, I hope you got something out of this video. It's a little bit shorter. If you didn't, or suppose you really weren't interested in the record transfer process, I must admit to you, there's an excellent resource here. I want to just, I'll show it to you here in a second. This is the Rockola troubleshooting guide. So maybe you're tired of my monotone voice, or maybe the content of the video isn't really what you're interested in, but I gotta tell you, if you can get a copy of this, now this is for the 447 through 452, but guess what? It was published because of the new selector system, which was in models all the way up through 474. So don't neglect this just because it says 447 to 452. It's very appropriate for any Rockola box with a 1, 2, 3 digits. And if you can get a copy of this, it's just invaluable. Now, the manual with its sequences is great. It tells you what components are in the circuit and what they do, but it doesn't tell you how to fix problems. The wiring diagrams are also excellent. If you know you got a specific wire problem and you want to know where it goes, that is one problem with the manual. You see all those components, but you really don't know where they are. Well, now you can trace them through here in the Molex connectors, etc. But this troubleshooting guide, I think probably now it can still be downloaded. I'll just give you an example of what we were talking about here. Troubleshooting guide 30. Problem: the gripper motor stops just as the record is placed on the turntable. Well, you don't have to listen to me anymore. You can go in here and look at this, and this actually tells you what's wrong and how to test it and fix it. So I didn't want to neglect that. I think that's a valuable, especially if you're going to be fixing or getting into this a little more and fixing more than one jukebox. All right, well, next time, again, I'm going to focus on specific problems now, not just general repair courses on the boxes. We're going to go over specific problems as they come up, and if they have general interest, I'm going to publish them. If I don't find anything, you won't hear from me for a while. But until then, have a good day, and I appreciate your interest.